The man didn't flinch. "You're absolutely right. And that's why I'm here, to clear things up." But Clint wasn't buying it. If this was a mistake, why did it feel like a warning? Clint held the man's gaze, waiting for him to clear things up. But instead of an apology or explanation, the man handed him an envelope. "Consider this a gesture of goodwill," he said. Clint opened it and found a hefty check, far more than the cost of the damage. It wasn't an apology. It was a payoff. Clint's jaw tightened. "You think you can just buy your way out of this?" The man's smile didn't waver. "Mr. Eastwood, this was never about an HOA violation. Let's just say, certain people are very interested in this property." That was it. This wasn't an accident. It was a power play. Someone wanted Clint off this land, and they were willing to use intimidation and destruction to make it happen. But they had miscalculated. Clint wasn't the kind of man to be bullied. He took one last look at the wreckage, then back at the suited man. "Tell whoever sent you," Clint said, ripping the check in half. They just made their biggest mistake. The man's smile finally faded, and Clint knew the real fight was just beginning. The suited man lingered for a moment, as if measuring Clint's resolve. Then, without another word, he turned back toward the SUV. The engine roared to life, and just like that, they were gone, leaving behind a mess I clearly thought could be swept under the rug. But Clint knew better. In the days that followed, he dug deeper, uncovering the truth. Big developers were eyeing the area, using HOA loopholes to pressure homeowners into selling. But Clint wasn't just any homeowner, and he wasn't going anywhere. With legal action in motion and the media catching wind of the story, the so-called authorities suddenly backed off. The fences were rebuilt, the damage repaired, but Clint knew this fight wasn't just about him. It was about standing up to those who thought they could take what wasn't theirs. And as he watched the sunset over his land, one thing was certain: he had won. Imagine waking up to chaos. Bulldozers tearing up your yard, fences ripped apart, and a group of so-called enforcers barking orders like they own the place. Now, imagine all of this happening to none other than Clint Eastwood. Sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly what went down when an overzealous homeowners association, armed with their own brand of justice, stormed a property they had no business touching. The kicker? Clint Eastwood wasn't even part of their HOA. What was supposed to be a peaceful day turned into a full-blown nightmare as workers demolished parts of the property, claiming violations that didn't even apply. But they had no idea who they were messing with. Eastwood, a man who's faced down Hollywood's toughest villains, wasn't about to let this slide. So what happens when a legend goes up against an out-of-control HOA? Stick around, because this is a showdown you won't believe. Clint Eastwood had dealt with plenty of trouble in his life, on and off the screen, but nothing quite like this. His quiet California retreat, a place where he found peace away from Hollywood, had suddenly turned into a battleground. Pieces of his fence were scattered, plants uprooted, and part of his driveway was in shambles. And the people responsible? A group of HOA officials and hired workers who showed up without warning, acting like they had full authority over his land. But here's the thing: Eastwood never signed up for this HOA. His property wasn't even within its jurisdiction. So why did they target his home? A clerical error, they claimed. A mix-up in the paperwork. But Clint wasn't buying it. Something felt off. Why was this HOA so aggressive? And more importantly, who was really behind this mess? One thing was certain: Clint Eastwood wasn't the kind of man to back down. As Clint surveyed the damage, his mind raced with questions. Who gave these people the authority to step foot on his land, let alone destroy it? The so-called HOA representative, a man in an ill-fitting blazer and dark sunglasses, barely made eye contact when Clint confronted him. "It was a misunderstanding," he muttered, shifting nervously. But the damage was real, and the excuses weren't adding up. Neighbors started gathering, whispering among themselves. Some had their own horror stories: fines for minor infractions, threats of legal action over minor landscaping choices. But none of them had seen anything this extreme. "They've been getting bolder," one neighbor admitted, "pushing rules that don't even exist." Clint's instincts told him there was more to this than a simple mistake. Someone had greenlit this operation, and they were hoping to get away with it. But they clearly didn't expect Clint Eastwood to be the one standing in their way. Clint wasn't the type to let things slide. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. He followed the so-called HOA representative as he tried to slip away, his voice steady but firm. "Who sent you?" The man hesitated, glancing at the workers still tearing up the property. Clint's sharp gaze didn't waver. The silence stretched. Then, under the weight of Clint's stare, the man finally mumbled, "It's not what you think." Not what he thought. That only made Clint more suspicious. He turned to the workers, demanding to see the paperwork authorizing this mess. They shuffled uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. One finally admitted, "We were just hired for the job. Orders came from higher up." Higher up? This wasn't just a case of an overreaching HOA. Someone powerful was pulling the strings. But why? And what did they stand to gain? Clint could feel it. This was just the beginning. Just as Clint was piecing things together, a sleek black SUV rolled up, its tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. The workers froze. Even the nervous HOA rep straightened up, suddenly looking more confident, as if backup had arrived. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a man in a crisp suit, his polished shoes crunching over the debris. He didn't look like your average HOA official. There was something calculated in the way he carried himself, like he was used to being in charge. "Mr. Eastwood," the man said smoothly, offering a tight-lipped smile. "I apologize for the confusion." But Clint had seen enough to know when someone wasn't telling the whole truth. "Confusion," he repeated, voice edged with steel. "That's a lot of destruction for just a misunderstanding."